Yo, the show before did not put any music, so I'm very sorry to the audience who's been in waiting. Anyway. Oh, those are loud headphones. Oh, that's loud. Anyway. Hello, everybody. Hello. I was gonna say dispatch. Calum was gonna say dispatch. That's bad of me. Anyway, Let Me Talk is back for 2023. We're back. We're better. We're hotter. Calum's never changes being hotter, but we've got two absolutely amazing guests today. I'm Tom Wilson. I'm one of the co-hosts of Let Me Talk here on St. Andrews Radio. And joining me is Calum Mayor, who is currently drawing on the board and making some art for our show. Because if you don't know, in the Star Studio, there's like a big plastic, glass, whatever, window that looks into the tech room. And on it is all different drawings of like different logos of different shows. And Let Me Talk wasn't on it. So Calum, ever the artist, was pissed off and is getting our goddamn logo and our goddamn frog on. Anyway, hello boys, how are we?
We're doing very well. How are you?
Good. CD, audio's good as well. The mics are working. Aiden, is your mic working? Please tell me it's working. Hello. Oh no!
Are we gonna share a mic? This is gonna get extra romantic.
We can share a mic.
Dude, it's gonna get cute. Yeah, it's annoying.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not. That's annoying. Oh, hold on. Wait, speak. Hello. Nope, never mind. That's broken. Okay, well, that's something for tech to figure out. But yeah, anyway, these boys are gonna share a mic. It's gonna be fine. It sounds good.
Is this picking up both of us?
It is picking up both of you. It's picking up you both great. Anyway, introduce yourselves.
Go ahead.
Cool. My name's Aidan Monks, and this is...
Oh, I'm Adam. I'm Adam Malinowski-Liu.
Cool.
This is Calum's bum.
And let's tell us a little bit about yourselves now. Aiden, you've been on Let Me Talk before. You are the first returning guest.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big honor, honestly,
impressive.
of this. Yeah, I know, yeah.
Okay.
It says a lot about the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be back. It's a fun vibe, as always. I'm second year. I currently take philosophy, English, and film, as I introduced myself last time. And yeah, I am of the Marxist persuasion.
Oh yeah, we've not even mentioned what this show is going to be about. So this week we're going to talk again about Marxism, and this time Calum's here. I don't know if you've not even heard from Calum, because Calum is busy drawing. He's got his ass in Adam's face. Well, last time it was only me and Aiden, because Calum was doing some secret agent stuff.
It was very intimate.
It was very cute. It was literally our first time meeting as well.
Yeah.
But since then, do you not have a show on Star now?
I do. I'm going to advertise it here.
Do it.
I'm going to be a sleaze. Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. for an hour, 60 plus minus, two pretentious white men talking about the music and movies you missed. First episode was on Daft Punk. We broke down various songs that we didn't just think were great songs that featured on great albums, but were in fact what we consider to be underappreciated album bests. Last episode, which will be on Spotify right now as we speak.
Oh, let's go. Okay.
Wes Anderson, where we talk about Steve Zissou and The French Dispatch and The Dark
Great
Knight
movie.
Limited. Yeah.
I've only seen two Wes Anderson movies, which are French Dispatch and Grand Budapest Hotel. Like both of them.
Grand Budapest is, we didn't talk about it because the whole point of the show is like talking about like things you would like not expect to like be on the sort of best of lists. And stuff like that. It's like it's spotlighting things that are otherwise not spotlighted enough. And the Grand Budapest, it's really difficult. But like along with like the Royal Tenenbaums, it's just like a...
Well, my flatmate Lauren, who coincidentally made a Let Me Talk hoodie for me for my birthday.
Cute.
Like handwritten
Merch?
bleach.
Merch?
Yeah,
listen.
Listen. We'll sell merch. We'll pay Lauren, and then from that we'll sell for some merch. Lauren said she'll do it if she gets paid, so why not?
Next episode, by the way, Wednesday night 8. We're talking about Nirvana.
Wednesday at 8 is an incredible time.
It is a good time. We were very lucky with it.
That's very good, because before people go out as well. It's very good. I'd say that probably the best time in my eyes would be, Thursday at 7. Thursday at 7 to me.
Thursday at 7, because no one's doing anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I'll be honest.
Your mic's broken as well. Oh no, it's not on. Speak.
Hold on.
There you go.
I actually think that Wednesday at 8 is a fantastic time. We actually had it last year, Wednesday at 8. And
Yes, we did.
conveniently, it's no longer ours anymore. And we are sat here
That's
Monday,
not my fault. That's not my
11
fault.
o'clock at the dead of night and talking to Aidan and Adam. It's fantastic.
You make it sound like we don't want to talk to Aiden and Adam.
whoever is listening.
Well, I mean, we've casually got someone that's just stolen our time slot. It's very upsetting.
Yeah,
we're in a
I wonder who that
we're in a
is.
period of mourning right
Welcome
now.
to come on as guests if you want.
Wow, it's
That'll be
like
fun.
that. It's straight up. It's like that.
Callum, I
Okay.
do want to say that I do like your illustration. I think it's very good under the
Oh,
circumstances.
yeah, let me see it. Oh, it looks very.
It's pretty terrible.
Looks very good.
I'll be
Anyway,
honest.
Adam, tell us a bit about yourself.
I am a third-year history student. So I'm Adam Malinowski-Liu, third-year history. I'm from California, and I'm also a William and Mary student. So next year I'm going back. I'm hype as shit to talk with Aidan about some Marxist things.
Cool.
So.
Now, let's talk a little bit about your week just before we get started. We got a little bit of time. Any positive about you? Just one deadline week, so I don't know if there's anything positive. But anything, you got one positive from the week you want to talk about? Anything that's been going on for you?
May or may not have sold a property for next year.
Yo, that's good. That's
Ooh.
very, very good.
Touch wood.
Good.
Yeah, that's pretty good, I would say. That's
Yeah.
about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Really, congrats, man, honestly. Adam, anything else? Anything?
I submitted the best essay of my life last week. It was 10% over the word count, which, no marks off for that. But I was so
No
proud
marks
of it.
off?
No. I mean, it's like plus or minus 10%.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
It's like just like exactly 10%.
Oh, okay, yeah, word, okay.
Yeah.
I get you.
That's nice. I usually go 5. It's really sad.
I mean, usually I do 10% below, but
I
like,
usually
this-
underwrite. I'm
Yeah,
terrible with
exactly,
essays.
yeah.
I'm terrible.
Yeah.
What was the subject on that?
Oh, I mean, it's very relevant to the conversation. I don't know if we're going to actually get into it, but I wrote about Lenin, not John Lennon, Vladimir Lenin, and the Russian Revolution. So
A common misconception.
common
Well,
confusion.
do you know the line in American Pie, the song by Don McLean, when Lenin read a book on Marx?
Oh yeah,
Everyone writes it as Lenin wrote the book on Marx and Vladimir Lenin.
Yeah,
It's about John Lennon.
yeah. I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And everyone just writes it, and I'm like, when you figure out what it is, it just makes the line 10 times better. Because Lenin wrote a book on, cool, like, that's like good,
Yeah.
that works as well, but yeah. Callum, any positive from the week? Any big thing going on, Mr. DJ?
Oh, I mean, I sorted out all my essays. So
That's
I'm
good.
I'm
That's good.
flying right now. Doing well.
That's very good.
Yeah.
Good. I've got an essay due Wednesday, which is about it's a historiography essay, which
Oh yeah, I'm writing one of those too.
I'm not a fan of historiography. I took the whole class in second year, and that's about Iranian Revolution, in '79.
Oh, you're writing on the history.
Yeah, so I've got a few different like historians. I've got communist historians. I've got religious historians. I've got looking at Khomeini and a few other people. But look, it's looking not too bad, and I've literally gone too far in. I was finally scrolling into the music section. There we go, we got it. Anyway, let's get started, shall we?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it'd be kind of decent or kind of interesting to hear, like, Adam talking more about his essay. I feel like it's kind of an interesting place to start. I feel
about
like.
Vladimir Lenin.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like a big part of like the history essay that I wrote is historiography, like what we were just talking about, and kind of like what I wrote about the historiography on Lenin, which is kind of true of like a lot of sort of historical figures that are, I guess you could say, controversial. Is the, I guess, like subjective attitude that people take, and kind of like how a lot of history is name calling, I guess, instead of actually like, reading what they did or reading what they wrote, or I guess kind of looking at things a little bit more objectively. So, a lot of characterizations of Lenin, I guess a lot of people probably are familiar with already, but I guess the real meat and bones of the essay is kind of like Lenin's political philosophy of how you're going to practically do a revolution, and that mostly involves like planning and kind of illegal conspiracy.
Okay, yeah.
I guess that's kind of like the edgy part of Lenin, and basically like all the strategies that he wrote about, like all across all of his works, is what he did in practice with the Russian Revolution. And I mean, yeah, it's a big part of history. So,
Well, I mean, I guess for like people that aren't very like knowledgeable about Lenin, I guess maybe you could give us like a little bit of background on like who he is.
yeah, sure.
It's like a quick Wikipedia.
So Vladimir Lenin was that's basically the alias that he used across all of his writing. But he's this Russian guy who was born in oh god, I don't remember who he was born. But he was born in the 19th century, and he was kind of like the leader of the Communist Party in Russia. and basically after like a series of very sort of tumultuous events in the late sort of Russian Empire, by 1917, the political conditions are unstable enough where Lenin and his Communist Party usurp control over the government, and they basically established Soviet Russia, which would then eventually become the Soviet Union, and that ultimately, basically defines the 20th century. So he's basically the guy who's in charge of most of the events. You could say that he's responsible for most of the events of the 20th century, just indirectly. So
That's really interesting, actually. I mean, to be fair, I've been trying to like get more familiar with like a lot of these kind of figures. Like, I was looking into a little bit about like Rasputin for some reason, and
yeah, Rasputin's great to study. He's hilarious.
Yeah, it just seems so absurd to me, the way in which he managed to kind of gain a little bit of attention. It just seems so random.
Rasputin as just like a figure of like anti-czarist propaganda. I'm gonna make the stupid claim that I think Rasputin caused the Russian Revolution.
I mean, like, I don't know.
Rasputin's having the literal. Hey, we'll pass that. We don't care. Rasputin shagging the Russian queen is what caused Russian.
Yeah, literally.
Let's be honest. The man apparently had a hog. I've got from what I've heard. This is not from history textbook.
It's one of the biggest anticlimaxes I reckon in history is that he didn't.
That's not what the Russian queen said.
He did.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think there's a lot of climaxing.
This is great. 11 p.m. slot. No one's listening. You can do.
Okay. Yeah. No. Lenin's
speak closer to the mic.
Sure, I'll speak closer. Lenin's
Sweet.
an interesting place to start with Marxism, actually, because it's almost he doesn't really seem like the logical place to start. I mean, there was a lot of since Marx's death and his writings were like subject to a lot of different like translations and transcriptions and different interpretations, and it was like a fairly like profound narrative even before like the actual implementation as theorized and as practiced came like into being, as you want to say. But like
I think that Lenin is actually a pretty solid place to start because it's basically the most like concrete example of Marx's sort of philosophy put into practice. Because Lenin is the guy who is the first guy to create the first Marxist country. So I think
but of course, like at the same time as like Lenin,
there's
a lot of the
background.
marginalized Marxists, like, and I'm not just talking about like Rosa Luxemburg and people like that, like people who are now very renowned more for like as ideas than for their actual work in the first place, more as like icons of like I would say like Marxist feminism, for example, purely on the basis that she was like a woman and a martyr who was executed by the state. All of those different people who are like I think definitely at the beginning of the 20th century is a great place to start for like the implementation of Marxism, and like that's like various places in Europe. But like, Adam's right, of course. Marxism, like it's a type of anti-idealistic materialism, which it's against the concept of it's against like the primacy of the idea, like in philosophy, and more pro a more pragmatic approach to like the actual implementation of ideas. If ideas can't be implemented, then what are they for, really, in the first place? Like armchair philosophizing, sitting around and talking about things is what it is, and that's useless. In Marx's take, it's like Marx is like a very like specific break in the tradition of German philosophy between people like Kant and Hegel and people you've heard of like that who are associated with that particular Enlightenment movement and slightly post-Enlightenment as well. Marx is profound on a sort of implementary and like political level, but he's also like a really, really, really important turning like curve in like the history of German like theory.
Why? I was going to say, like, do you want to say what you were going to say?
I was thinking that like one of the things I like about Marx, especially doing both theory in international relations and in history, modern history, which is what I study, is the fact that it's so very is not the right term. It's so versatile. There you go. The versatility of Marxist theory, because there's obviously the economic theory, which most people kind of refer to.
Okay, for me as a dummy, right? What's the difference between like communism and Marxism then? They're just as briefly as you can.
Well, communism stems essentially from Marxism. Like the Communist Manifesto.
Communism
So
is
Marxism is basically like an entire method. Like it's basically a method of analyzing information, and basically Marxism is the entire way that people do history now. Like the entire idea of historiography is based off of Marxism, and that's basically like looking at a source, like looking at a document, and then if it's written by, let's say, like the government, you analyze the source objectively. You don't just like take it at its word. You understand like where there might be reasons to write that source in a certain way that includes certain details or doesn't include certain details. And that's ultimately like basically all of academic history now. Most of it can be traced to the way that Marx was analyzing history himself, because on top of being an economist and a philosopher and all these other things, a political activist, he was a historian. That was super major.
A lot of his history as well, a lot of his influence over the way we view history can also be like read in his different analyses. Engels as well. We should spotlight him.
Yeah. We're leaving out a
big name, but like a lot of the ways we perceive different events in history, for example, like Lincoln freeing the slaves, or the Paris Commune, and the French Revolution itself, and of course the English Revolution, which is referring to like the Civil War as well as like the Restoration and the Glorious Revolution in that period in the 17th century. In English history, the term English Revolution didn't exist until Marxist historiography existed, because it was either Marx or one of the people that followed him directly. Marxist historians nonetheless perceived that particular event as like one of the most cataclysmic moments in revolutionary history in general, in Marx's own conception of history as this like non-organic kind of like narrative of rupture and sort of struggle and things like that. The English Revolution is like almost a perfect example, because what we perceive as revolutionary, like in the common consciousness, is something like violent that you remember and you learn from and are never to do again, and but the English Revolution is something that no one particularly talks about, because as a revolution it was so perfectly done. And like Marxists like Eagleton and stuff that you can read now will make a case that a revolution only really works if 200 years later no one really talks about it. But that's quite a Trotskyite view.
Okay, so what's communism?
Communism, according to Marx at least, is
communism. Like I describe it as like his like goal. Like I describe it as like his idea of what society should be working towards.
It's an economically classless society.
Communism is kind of like a lot of things. I mean, like in common speech, it's like kind of synonymous with like poverty, and like a lot of other things.
Hunger.
Like
okay,
like
so you said was Aidan? You said it was synonymous with a classless society. So I think something maybe interesting to look at. Is
Sorry. Oh, Jesus Christ. Sorry.
I mean, we can go for the music break.
No, that's just, oh my God. Sorry, I was
what's communism? What's a musical? I think that's a good answer.
Well, that's the joke. We fucked it up.
I would say maybe in the context of even like this town, like St Andrews, why is the idea of class problematic?
Which linked to that as well. I was going
I
to
don't think the idea of class is problematic.
Or like just like how it functions.
It's
do you not think?
Of class. So
The
basically,
existence of
class.
There you go. That's what I mean.
Class or class divisions. Okay, so the existence of class as a conceptually and practically, like the concept of class cannot exist unless like it carries with itself like this kind of like value judgment which manifests as a hierarchy.
It's kind of like relegating people to certain values based off of
things they
money,
can't control.
It's basically like class, for instance. You have inherited wealth, which is.
So you think this is like an instinct, like created by this, like the society we live in?
We start on like a basic. When we talk about class, we should obviously I think we should start on the most basic level. I was watching this really cracked debate between like this Marxist like philosopher and Charlie Kirk of all people, and like he starts by like basically like explaining like, okay, so like the socialist position with like things that like people can relate to now, and it's like you have to start like simply as like you don't believe you cannot morally justify like predicating a belief on this like on the idea that people can like they can come into the world and be divvied out into different like very unjust and diverse and situations that they generally like cannot control themselves, and that is for the most part the case.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, you have to like ask yourself, like, why does wealth inequality exist in our society? Like, is it really like a matter of people being lazy? Is it a matter of people being, you know?
But do you not think that's at the very least a contributing factor, though?
I mean, like when you look at like, let's say like the impoverishment of Africa, like basically this entire historical phenomenon of Europe destroying Africa and profiting an insane amount off of African labor for hundreds of years. I mean, are you going to then look at poor African people and say, oh, you simply are not working hard enough, you simply need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps? I mean, no, of course not, because obviously like there's a giant historical phenomenon, there are structural factors that individuals themselves cannot overcome to something like that.
Yeah, and even looking at like Western examples, like America, for example, where a lot of people, it's the land of the free, it's the land of like plenty and shit, but like a place where like Gallup will report that 85% of workers like are really unhappy at work in general, like, and talking about workers, even like the striking laborers on like the rail lines at the moment, like, are lazy. You have to like consider the fact that like when people are working for better conditions, better money, they're working for themselves fundamentally is another like real central tenet of any kind of socialist theory, is that like you're working for like something which you own yourself. You're not alienated from your labor, you're not alienated from yourself or your fellow people that are working and are sort of reified into these kind of like, like capital commodities that are just like made and like used for generating and extracting like wealth for not you.
But wouldn't you say like working for yourself or like working towards something that you benefit from like gives you a sort of incentive? Like if
No, that's the thing. We are absolutely in favor of hard work. We are absolutely in favor of being rewarded for hard work. Mm-hmm. But what we're saying is that under the current system of the world, is capitalism, of course, you are not rewarded according to your hard work. You are rewarded according to your inheritance. That's a big one. And also, in the case of certain wealthy billionaires, how much you exploit other people.
Like Marxism at this point is also like it's like tied with like feminism and race theory and gender theory and stuff like that. It's like we won't get too into like the theory of it because it's really dense. We don't have enough time for it. But like you're rewarded as well to a certain extent. You're rewarded based on not just your inheritance of like material like value, things like money. You're also like rewarded on the basis of like whatever group you're born into, like, or you identify as,
or where you live, or lots of arbitrary factors.
Yeah, some like impoverished like child like in Africa like is not being given the same opportunities as like some like Parisian aristocrat. Like it's it's not.
So we are in favor of like being rewarded for hard work.
In terms of, I think we're going in the right direction in terms of what I want to talk about in a little bit, especially which is leftism at St Andrews, and obviously how we are known as being a bit of a
leftism. What?
Like leftism what?
Leftism in St Andrews.
Yeah, like leftist movements in St Andrews.
It could be interesting to talk about like what we're talking about in the context of this time.
But we're going to go on a break. We're going to do a bit of music, and the song we're going to play is "We're All in This Together" by High School Musical.
Woo!
Because fun fact, Blind Mirth, we just had a High School Musical themed show, Blind Mirth every Monday at 8 p.m. Which I will not be in Blind Mirth the next 2 shows. So. Enjoy. Oh, 3 shows actually. No, 2 shows. Anyway, we're going to play this song, and we'll be right back with Adam and Aidan to talk about more about leftism, Marxism, communism, and your mum. So we'll be right back. See you in a bit.
We've got 25 minutes. Let's try and like properly go for it. Right. What were we going to talk about, Tom?
I got my brain just
there we go.
Working. Yeah, I was going to talk about like leftism in St Andrews, sort of like leftist leaning movement, and especially the fact that. Every time you tell someone, "Hey, I go to St Andrews," it's the posh town, which is fair, which is incredibly fair. And I think if we kind of like, I was gonna tell you, so I know a number of people in Cash campaign for affordable student housing. People don't know, and I'm thinking like putting that movement in place, and we just look at something very simple that affects everyone that is in this town, and that's if we look at the housing prices and the housing crisis, and us not being, I mean, we just that we all cheered because Aidan was able to hopefully secure a flat for next year.
Yeah.
When we look at it, and if we I think because we were talking on the break, just we want to talk, get it more simple, helping like kind of like the person who, if you want to explain it to like someone who doesn't really understand left-wing causes or maybe not really heard about them, if we kind of like look at how a leftist would look at the current housing crisis and how, not necessarily how they'd fix it in general, but how they look at it and the critiques of like, you know, how they'd see it.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with Cash as well, and I'm in Labour Soc, and I participate in a lot of like different like events and things, and organised in reading groups and stuff we do for like the Socialist Society. I mean, obviously, it's like absolutely atrocious. Like, I mean, like a lot of the students. It's not just atrocious for the students in St Andrews who are coming to St Andrews to study in what's like advertised as this kind of like, you know, cute little coastal town. They're coming from around the world to study here, and then suddenly they can't live here and they go to live in Dundee, which since 2018, to be fair, has been receiving a lot of pretty good funding from the local city council. And like you can tell in the centre where it's like, you know, it's got like a lot better than it was, and it's not like the heroin overdose capital of Europe anymore as it was like reputed to be a while ago.
Margaret Thatcher.
But like even then, like people, not only are students from St Andrews having to live in Dundee or like places nearby like Cooper and Strathkinnis, but they're also, the students in Dundee are also being really affected by this as well, and they're not being able to like get as easily accessible accommodation, whether that's halls or private or whatever. I think there's also like, I mean, along with Cash, which is the campaign for affordable student housing, like there's also like various organizations I think that are like giving basically food banks for students who can't afford to eat, which is an absolute abomination. And I don't think that like you need to be like a leftist moralist to like really see that. I mean, this is not okay. Like,
yeah,
like it's
definitely,
objectively not. Like, what you do about it once you figure it out, not that it should take very long, that it's like a bad thing, like, is a different question. And I think that like the fact that like there has to be in the first place these privately run, student run as well, organizations to help students, where like the university itself as an institution is not doing so, is really odd to me. Like, it's not just bad, it's also very odd that people aren't stepping up in the same, like, institutionally and structurally to fix this.
I mean, when you look at like homelessness or food insecurity and all these other problems, and you kind of realize as well that we are in one of the wealthiest societies in the world, it kind of becomes evident that the current system that we exist under is not the most rational or even the most efficient by its own standards. And I mean, ultimately, like, we have more than enough resources to provide food and housing and water and electricity and internet access to everyone for nothing, basically. We could all just be paying nothing for all these things, and ultimately, though, these aren't guarantees to us because there is enormous profits to be made from these things. There are giant industries behind these things, and there are, of course, lots of very powerful people, because they have lots of money, that are preventing these things from becoming accessible to everyone.
Yeah, not only could we like fix the homelessness crisis in this country and in the majority of European countries and America itself, like not only could we fix it, but like the panic that you hear some conservatives having about like giving free housing essentially to homeless people to get them off the street is going to like basically take up like room where like, you know, these private like landowners and landlords could lose money and things like that. Like, there would be so many houses left over after that. Like, the idea that like the homeless community would eat the fucking housing market is ridiculous. And then at the same time,
though, why does there have to be a market for this? Why is it that we can't just, say, okay, you're a human being, so you deserve shelter as a privilege of being a human being, because we can treat all of each other with a common decency.
How would you look at, how would you two, and you'd say as leftists, and you look at it as like through Marxist, not just theory, but thinking, would react to someone, so I'll give you an example of like, I guess a not really a rebuttal is not the right term, but just a if you will, a counter argument, which just, I'll give you my dad, who is the most centrist man you will ever meet. The man, when I say centre, he has supported Margaret Thatcher and Jeremy Corbyn.
Wow.
There is no more...
What a character.
So my dad was we were talking about the housing crisis in Andrews, and obviously he thinks it's a mess. Then he goes, well, you know, when you were a kid, so we had this, I was born in France, and then we were meant to live there for a long time. We're not French, but just my parents had settled there. Not as like expats, like they just settled there. He left his life in England. My mum left her life in France. in Belgium, and they kind of like left their countries and they settled in France in a very small apartment that I grew up in. And so they bought that. When I was 1, they bought that apartment, and we were going to live there. Things changed drastically. We ended up being expatriated to Tokyo. Huge change in life. Wow. So that apartment, my parents didn't sell it. Because we weren't living there, they were like, that was the only property they owned, and they had people come in and they would essentially rent it out. And that's what's funded part of my uni experience, you know. And my dad was saying, but what do you, not everyone is just a massive, like disgusting, if you will, like big landlord that owns a bunch of houses, and that's their whole gig. How would you as leftists react to people, especially in this town, because we do have a lot of wealthy students, and I'm not going to deny that, I'm literally wearing the hoodie from my school because of the show today in Mirth. This is the American International School of Muscat. It's a private school. I'm not denying my background at all. But how would you react to people saying like, oh, like some people is just they have one home, and they rent it out and then they live somewhere else. How would you react to like those people who are saying like, we're not big landlords, this is just helping our family.
Well, I think we all have a bit of affluence in our backgrounds. Of
course.
But, I mean, my parents have also been renters for a little part of their life.
Do you mean renters? Do you mean like they've rented or they...
They've been, like, owning properties that then they rent
Okay,
to other people,
yeah.
But in terms of...
Would you not say there's a slight bit of hypocrisy there? Like there, that's
that we push for a Marxist.
Well, I guess you can't really do anything about your situation.
I say
it's
we.
not your fault.
Tom
or like it's not
on their opinions
like,
don't count. I'm just a co-host. But in terms of Aidan and Adam,
but yeah,
that,
do you not think that's like a very interesting situation to be in?
I mean, even though we've like enjoyed affluence in our lifetimes, like I mean, Marx himself was like the product of a relatively affluent background. I mean, like
it's one of the common criticisms.
I mean, the thing is though, is that you don't have to.
But you think it's relevant?
You don't have to be the most oppressed person in society to advocate for the oppressed people of society. I mean, ultimately, like the fact that we go to St. Andrews at all, like signals that we have a certain level of privilege.
I remember we talked actually last time about Hassan Piker.
Yeah, yeah.
And Hassan Piker like was recently got a lot of shit for.
If just very quick recap on Hassan Piker because you don't know who that is. Twitch streamer used to be part of the Young Turks. Yeah, very much. He is one of the biggest leftist content creators. Hi, Calum. Where have you gone to? One of the biggest leftist content creators in the world, and comes from a pretty affluent background. Now you were saying with the house. Sorry,
I was saying. I mean, he recently purchased a
big old house,
big old LA house,
big old
for
crib.
about $2 million or something.
Yeah,
and he got a little smack for it. And I mean, and he justified it fairly succinctly, more succinctly than I think I can. Is that he says essentially that like when you live under the capitalist mode, you can only like function under the capitalist mode, and like to attempt to do otherwise like outside of like revolutionary means, like. It's essentially what he said is that like it's essentially impossible. Plus, he's made $2 million Twitch streaming.
Yeah,
and advertising and building a very large audience.
He is owning his. I think his argument is as well that I've owned my own means of production in a way. So it's.
I mean, I would say like a parallel to this sort of situation is like you don't have to be necessarily a woman to advocate for feminism. I mean, you can still be from like a group that even like benefits from patriarchy and still be an advocate against patriarchy.
Yeah, I think,
and in the same way, like we are beneficiaries of capitalism, but we ultimately are anti-capitalist.
Yeah, I was mentioning that mostly because I think if you're talking to people in town, especially people like I guess from a similar background than us, and we obviously again we're not denying our background, I'm denying my background. It's one of those things that people will say, well, hey, my parents own a home. My parents we don't have that place in France anymore, and we didn't have for a while, and then now they've settled in Oman, where I grew up, and they've bought the house. Essentially, this is the house that they live in. They were renting for years. They'll be like, well, my parents rent one house out. My parents we have like a summer home. But like, my parents are good people. They're not, like landlord pigs, if you will. So I think that's kind of like I brought that up as like, if you will, a quote counter argument, mostly because I think. That's one of the barriers I think people will have if they're wanting to look into in terms of leftist thinking or Marxist thinking is that they'll look at their own situation and then think, well, my dad's a good guy, my mom's a good lady. So
Yeah. I mean, like I consider my parents to be pretty good people, and I mean they used to rent out to people as well. I mean we're not blaming people for responding to incentives within society. We just believe that these incentives shouldn't exist. And really, like if you're gonna compare like like one person who owns like one house and is renting to like a family, I mean that doesn't compare to the sort of companies that own hundreds of thousands of acres of property, and they are inflating their prices because they have monopoly holds over entire regions. And also rent hikes was one of the biggest problems of the pandemic. I mean, like when there were millions of people around the world losing their jobs, you still had landlords refusing to lower their rents to compensate for these changing situations. And I mean, there's nothing that you can say about that besides just it being a facet of greed. I mean,
like maybe not even like that these incentives like shouldn't exist, is that they have to exist in order for like you to see that they like are bad, and that you have to stop having them for you to like deconstruct your own internalization of values, which I mean, anyone who actually engages with a kind of like who has the time, I guess, to engage with like a theoretical text like Capital, like a massive, dense like economic study, like will ultimately be faced with having to deconstruct. I mean, in terms of like St Andrews as well, I mean the housing crisis here, like it's nothing new. We're calling it like a crisis, and it's taking a forefront now. But like it's been around since like at least the 1930s. Like I recently walked in for some reason to the St Andrews like museum on North Street, and they do like a whole background like thing on like essentially like there was a kind of like a poverty clearance in like the 1930s in order to make the town more expensive and more attractive to sort of more affluent either homeowners or holiday makers to see the open.
Essentially, I did not know that.
It's essentially like molding the town in sort of in line with the with the reputation of golf as it has always been, as a very bourgeois and privileged sport. Yeah.
No, it's very fair. And I'm seeing this question that Cam's written down. I'll lead into it, and then you ask the actual question. We talk a lot, about like what a Marxist or any different leftist sees as like the ideal society. We look at, we were just talking about, like you're saying, Hassan, the benefits from a capitalist system, but looks at, wants another system in place, which then leads to your question that you just wrote.
Oh, this one?
This one, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't talked for a while, I'm going to be honest. I'm just listening. Like, this is really this kind of conversation is like honestly really above me. I'll be very honest.
No, it's
like,
not. Well, then
in terms of like I don't have much to contribute, because essentially like I'm not educated on this, so it's very interesting to hear what you two have to say, because obviously abundance more than me. Okay, so this is my kind of question. Obviously, like I have no idea. Like I'm just asking these questions out of curiosity, trying to understand. Okay. Could this ever be a kind of society in the UK? Could we ever have a sort of capitalist or Marxist society in the UK? Would it? I mean, not would it ever happen? Because
do you mean a communist society? You said capitalist. We have a capitalist.
Yeah, communist. Sorry, you know what I mean. Yeah. What do you guys think? And what would it take to put that in place?
The UK as opposed to like everywhere else, or like
I think he's pointing out the UK as a thing. We're just pointing it as like
you could even say America,
because I'm thinking we're just kind of making it more like relevant to like the audience that kind of lives in here, if you know what I mean. Like I think we're using
like what
doesn't have to be, but I think
institutions and what things would have to be changed in order to.
Oh, that's a big subject.
Okay, so I think like okay, well slow and steady wins the race, I guess. I mean, you have to start somewhere. I would say like one of like the primary tenets of like any kind of orthodoxical Marxism is that the idea that these things like divisions based on like class, race, sex, gender, ethnicity, even religion to an extent, like all of these different things are human made and can be ultimately human unmade, and at the end of the day, these aren't predicated on any kind of divine, natural, or even mythological ordinance in the slightest.
So Would you say that we shouldn't have terms to divide these categories? Like we should just like not have.
No, I'm not.
No.
saying,
I mean,
this isn't like a semantic game that I'm talking about right now. It's not. We're not talking about like whether like.
we should talk about race like as a concept.
Whether we should talk about it as a concept, or that we should like be able to like discern between differences that we can empirically observe. I'm saying that these things shouldn't carry with them a kind of social and structural and ideological value, which is ultimately, it's ultimately divvied into a hierarchy which is inherited over a very long historical period, not least in this country, but if we're talking about Britain specifically, of course, since not just since capitalism, but since feudalism as well, and. I'll let Adam talk, to be honest. He's
Gotcha.
desperate for it.
Okay, so I'll put this in real pragmatic terms, like really, easy to understand terms, in terms of like, can we have a communist society? Is this like a real thing? Okay, so over the last few weeks, right, we've had these basically catastrophic fucking disasters in America with these trains derailing and, this entire disaster with chemicals spilling into water sources and into the air and it's exploding and people are, becoming ill and whatnot. So the reason why this has happened is because the people who own the rail company and the people who basically own these chemicals do not care about the consequences of having for-profit, structuring of their companies. So for the last several years, the union workers in America, around these parts of America, they've been organizing and they've been striking in order to improve their working conditions. And among those conditions are more safe working conditions that are more regulated, that in which the train tracks are more kept up to date and the staffing is more extensive. But ultimately, the people who own these companies are not interested in doing those things because that cuts into their profits, which is ultimately the entire structure of the society that we live in. So if we just had the workers in control of the company, in which they would be able to allocate the resources themselves intelligently, because they are the people who work in these environments every single day, we wouldn't have this sort of disaster happening. We wouldn't have these disasters happening all over the place all the time. And instead, we would be able to create a society that is governed by experts that do these things as their lives, instead of people who have ulterior motives, and those motives do not have any sort of consideration for the impact on regular people's lives. Mm-hmm. So that's really, to answer your question, is communism realistic? Honestly, I think it's more outlandish to say that capitalism is realistic, because we have constant catastrophe. Every single month it's something new, and it gets worse and worse.
Every 4 to 7 years, the economy literally tanks, and then you have to the people that inevitably tank the economy are tasked with literally rebuilding it, and then we're back to basics, we're back to scratch. It's like nothing happened. So Britain specific as well. There's other specific points, we have a constitutional monarchy and stuff, and then the constitutional monarchy is tied to the superstructure of the Church of England and all of that, people say that it's it brings in loads of money and that justifies it. It doesn't justify its existence, the way that it communicates the histories of the atrocities of our country and our the constitutional monarchy as itself is probably worth an entire episode. I mean you've done
we could have an entire episode on literally everything that we're talking about.
Yeah, we've kind of gone over in depth why we think that there is problems riddled in a capitalist society, right? Let's be honest, guys, right? Do you think there would be any hiccups or problems with a communist society?
Absolutely.
Or is there anything
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, what do you think doesn't work as well? Or wouldn't
work as well as in capitalism?
Yeah. Is there any, do you just think that communism is perfect, or is there things
basically? So Marxism's it's so
because surely you agree with the idea that no political system is perfect.
Yeah. I mean, we acknowledge that.
Of course. The only utopian thing is that ever thought that their version of utopia would be this kind of perfect paradisal kind of existence where these kind of French guys like Fourier, who basically thought literally, I'm not fucking around. Literally thought that when utopia came about, the sea would turn to lemonade. Okay, and Marx basically threw away with all that shit. Marx is a materialist. He's not a utopian. The term utopian, even in Marx's time in the 19th century in Germany, was literally thrown around in a mocking kind of way. They made fun of all of these people because they knew for a fact that the end point of like the Marxist revolution, the communism, like which he notoriously is like pretty vague about like describing, but like ultimately like describing like the communist like end point, the final like kind of cause, I guess, wasn't his project. His project was about describing the present. There's an amazing Terry Eagleton quote, which I've written down here, which I want to say is like, the true image of the future is the failure of the present, which I think just about summarizes Marx's theory of history and the
That's a good quote. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course there'd be hiccups if we're being realistic. I mean, it's a long process, and Marx himself, like wrote like very extensively on the necessity of capitalism running its course in order to like achieve that end. Of course, there's going to be hiccups along the way. Like,
do you think this kind of like idea, like this capitalist idea, is just so ingrained into people it'd be impossible to restructure?
And simply because we are completely running out of time,
we have 3 minutes.
That is like worth 100 years.
I know,
worth of
yeah.
work.
Because
I
I
mean,
feel like every
like-
time I argue back against something that Adam says, his kind of ideas that like these are ideas coming from the society that we're in, and like I'm only thinking with like.
I just want to say,
sort of-
Calum, I always love talking to you about literally anything.
I mean, I try my best.
one of them's getting punched post show, by the way.
Oh, I mean, I hope so. Maybe each other. We'll see. No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, like, yeah, it makes sense because like the society that we live in obviously would advocate for itself, and it's going to make all alternatives look like shit, and make like any alternative to what we currently exist in seem impossible. But I mean, you know, once upon a time, it seemed as though slavery was going to be this eternal part of human civilization, and what do you know? We look back on it and we think it's crazy. And I think that, you know, in a few hundred years, we're going to look back on capitalism, and that's going to be the exact same way we look at it.
I mean, the transition from feudalism to capitalism was a really long and really brutal process that took a lot of time. And like, I mean, you can read anything on it, but like, you know, the concept of like, the serfs essentially moving like trade guilds into the city, and then all the peasants having to basically be like the really like brutal urbanization and like uprooting program which occurred, which basically caused the birth of the capitalist city. Like Marx is really detailed about it, and Engels is as well in his amazing book, like The Conditions of the Working Class in England.
There are lots of books to read.
There are lots of books. Don't read the Communist Manifesto.
I need to read more. I need to read more, to be honest.
Don't
Yeah,
read
I
the
really
Communist
do.
Manifesto. Read the German ideology.
All right.
Quality book
Yeah.
recommendations.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, that's
on,
actually
guys.
been really
we
fun.
really
I
wish,
really-
honestly,
really enjoyed
if we had, you know what, Cam, we need to start an independent podcast.
we certainly do.
If we had more time, we absolutely would
course.
listen to you boys for 2 hours.
Well, I mean,
straight.
listen,
It's
we
been great.
can
Great
talk.
first show
We
back.
can talk a lot more about this on Thursday night if everyone's.
Oh,
coming
yo,
round.
yeah.
I mean, I've
House,
invited
house,
all
house,
three of you
house,
guys,
house.
so I'm expecting. all
You're
three of
making
you
me
guys
miss
to
the
be there.
second leg of the Man United game. We have.
What are we saying?
It's how
You
much of a
coming?
friend I am.
We'll be in the Vic talking about communist.
In the Vic. What are you talking about? You're at mine.
And then in the Vic.
And then in the Vic, yeah.
Oh.
Well, just like a pounding music, just
Yeah,
talking
exactly, yeah.
communist theory.
Callum,
Yeah,
are you advertising your prees? to
I'm
everyone?
advertising.
Everyone come to Callum's house. The address is.
Listen, I thought it was relevant because everyone here's coming, but yes, everyone listen to the show. You can come in. You can come.
All right. Well, thank you very much
Bring your
everyone for
own drink.
listening. Yeah, everyone come to Callum's house.
Everyone-
the address
everyone come to my
is
house.
95 South Street. Someone's going to
It's
have to
official.
pull up on him.
I live on South Street.
Anyway, we're ending the show with Sicko Mode and what is it?
It's a Sicko Mode Inc. It's Feel Good Inc. and Sicko Mode combined. It's pretty
It
cool.
sounds so sick. Anyway, thank you for coming, boys.
Thank you
Big
for
love.
having us on.
Big
Thank
love.
you.
Great show back. Anyway, Callum,
This has been Let Me Talk. Good night.
see you next week. Goodbye.